shadows of history.
In 2017, a set of Cold War-era research documents quietly appeared in the archives of American government records. To most readers, the files seemed technical and obscure, reports discussing language patterns, village leadership structures, and cultural traditions across East Africa. But historians who examined them noticed something unusual. The research programs described in the documents were not funded solely by academic institutions. Several were connected indirectly to Cold War intelligence analysis. During the 1950s and 1960s, intelligence agencies often supported academic research in regions considered strategically important. Anthropology, geography, and sociology offered insights into how societies functioned, information that could influence diplomatic and political strategy. The newly released documents did not describe espionage in the traditional sense. Instead, they revealed a quieter approach, understanding cultures, social networks, and leadership systems through academic fieldwork. For historians today, these files raise an important question. When science and intelligence intersect, where does research end and strategy begin? The research programs described in those archives emerged during one of the most transformative periods in African history. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, colonial rule across the continent began to collapse. One country after another declared independence. New governments formed, new political movements appeared, and global powers watched closely. For both the United States and the Soviet Union, Africa became a region of strategic interest. Each side hoped to build alliances with emerging nations. Understanding local cultures, political structures, and leadership traditions suddenly became a matter not only of academic curiosity, but also geopolitical importance. Anthropologists and regional experts were uniquely positioned to study these dynamics. Through fieldwork in villages, towns, and regional communities, researchers could observe how authority operated within traditional societies. Their reports provided insights into social networks, economic systems, and political loyalties, information valuable for diplomats and policymakers navigating the rapidly changing political landscape of Africa. Anthropological fieldwork in East Africa during the 1960s followed a familiar academic pattern. Researchers traveled to rural communities, lived among local populations, and recorded observations about language, customs, and leadership systems. Many studies focused on traditional governance structures within villages and tribal communities. At the time, such research appeared purely academic. Universities across Europe and North America funded similar projects around the world. Yet some of the newly declassified files suggest that certain programs also shared findings with analysts interested in regional stability and political trends. For intelligence agencies during the Cold War, cultural knowledge could offer strategic advantages. Understanding how communities organized themselves, how decisions were made, how alliances formed, helped analysts interpret political developments in newly independent states. The researchers themselves often viewed their work through a purely academic lens, but the institutions funding their projects sometimes had broader interests. Behind every major research expedition lies a network of institutions that make the work possible. In the mid-1960s, universities in the United States and Europe increasingly funded anthropological fieldwork in Africa. Grants supported travel, equipment, language studies, and extended stays within rural communities. At first glance, these projects appeared entirely academic. Anthropologists were studying social organization, oral traditions, kinship systems, and political leadership structures. Their findings contributed to scholarly journals and university lectures. Yet some Cold War historians later discovered that certain research initiatives were supported through indirect funding channels connected to government agencies. In certain cases, academic grants were linked to broader programs designed to improve geopolitical understanding of regions undergoing rapid political transformation. For policymakers observing Africa's independence movements, anthropological insights offered something unique, a deeper understanding of local dynamics that statistics alone could not explain. cultural knowledge helped analysts interpret political alliances, regional conflicts, and emerging leadership structures. The research itself remained academic in nature, yet its strategic value extended far beyond the university walls where many of these projects began. The value of cultural research during the Cold War extended beyond anthropology departments. Reports written by field researchers sometimes circulated among policy analysts studying political stability in newly independent nations. For intelligence agencies, understanding how communities functioned at the local level could provide important context for interpreting national events. Leadership in many regions of East Africa did not depend solely on formal government institutions. Traditional authority structures, elders, clan leaders, religious figures often played equally significant roles in shaping political outcomes. Anthropological fieldwork offered detailed observations of these systems. Researchers recorded how disputes were resolved, how alliances formed, and how communities responded to outside influence. Such insights could help policymakers anticipate political changes or understand regional tensions. This overlap between academic research and strategic analysis did not always occur transparently. Many scholars later argued that the relationship raised ethical questions about how their work might be used beyond academic circles. By the early 1970s, debates began to emerge within the academic world. Anthropologists started questioning whether research connected to geopolitical interests risked compromising the neutrality of their work. Some scholars argued that cultural studies should remain strictly independent from political agendas. Anthropology, they believed, existed to understand human societies, not to serve strategic goals. Others pointed out that research had always been influenced by historical circumstances, and complete separation from political institutions was rarely possible. Professional organizations responded by introducing new ethical guidelines. Researchers were encouraged to disclose funding sources, respect community consent, and ensure that their findings did not harm the people whose cultures they studied. These discussions reshaped anthropology as a discipline. They also revealed how deeply the Cold War had influenced academic research around the world. Even projects designed for scholarly understanding could become entangled in larger geopolitical narratives. By the 1980s, the geopolitical landscape that had shaped earlier research programs began to change. The Cold War was slowly approaching its end, and many intelligence-related initiatives tied to cultural studies faded from view. Universities continued to support anthropological research in Africa, but the focus shifted toward collaboration with local scholars and institutions. Research partnerships became more transparent and community-based. Meanwhile, earlier reports from the 1960s and 1970s were gradually archived. Boxes of field notes, interviews, and cultural surveys were stored in libraries and government records facilities. For decades, few researchers examined them closely. Yet those archives quietly preserved a record of how knowledge, science, and politics had intersected during one of the most tense periods of global history. When historians began examining newly released archival material in 2017, they discovered references that had previously received little attention. Among them were documents describing the flow of cultural research between academic institutions and government analysts during the Cold War. The files did not reveal a secret operation in the dramatic sense often imagined in spy stories. Instead, they illustrated something more subtle, a network of knowledge exchange between scholars and policymakers. Anthropological research helped governments understand societies undergoing rapid political change. For historians, the significance of these documents lies not in secrecy alone, but in context. They show how scientific knowledge can be shaped by the historical moment in which it is produced. During the Cold War, the global struggle for influence touched almost every field of study, including anthropology. Today, scholars studying Cold War history are re-examining these research programs with new perspectives. By combining archival documents, oral histories and academic publications, they attempt to reconstruct how knowledge circulated between universities and political institutions. For many historians, the story is not of conspiracy, but of complexity. Scientific research, political interests, and cultural understanding often intersected in ways that reflected the anxieties of the Cold War era. The challenge now is to interpret that history honestly, acknowledging both the contributions of anthropological scholarship and the geopolitical environment in which it developed. History often reveals that knowledge and power are rarely separate. The Cold War was not fought only with weapons and diplomacy. It was also fought through information, through efforts to understand cultures, societies, and political systems across the world. The anthropological research conducted in East Africa during the 1960s was part of that broader story. Scholars traveled across the region to document traditions, languages, and social structures. Their work expanded academic knowledge, yet the same knowledge sometimes carried strategic value for governments observing a rapidly changing continent. Decades later, the release of archival documents allows historians to look back with greater clarity. These records remind us that science does not exist in isolation. It is shaped by the political landscapes in which it operates. Understanding that relationship is essential if we want to learn from history rather than repeat it. If you want to explore more hidden chapters of global history, declassified archives, and the untold stories behind world events, continue the investigation here on Shadows of History.